Welcome to U.S. News Source Channel. NATO and the Ukrainian armed forces took action. In the southeast of the country, reconnaissance was carried out with NATO aircraft in the skies of critical regions. Large-scale operations can be launched in the regions. NATO support determines the fate of countries. Crimean lands can be the new front of the war at any moment. Russia's loss of Crimea can become a black mark on the army. Increased operations on the south and east fronts have now taken over the southeast front as well. As we mentioned in our previous video, explosions took place in key areas in Zaporizhia on the southeast front. As a result of the explosions in these critical areas, both the intersection of two important highways and the ships of the Russian Navy providing sea communication were at risk. These events took place with the right moves of the Ukrainian army. In case of further increase in mutual attacks, the highways extending to Russia and the border regions to the Azov Sea will be under the control of Ukraine. In order to ensure this, operations are increased. This time, it has been reported that the Ukrainian armed forces and NATO have started preparations for the southern and southeastern fronts. According to breaking news, NATO planes started to explore the southeast. It is expected that the Ukrainian army will launch large-scale attacks on the regions. NATO also gives full support to the Ukrainian forces that are preparing to attack. This support is also seen in the growing reserves of armored vehicles on the left bank of the Dnieper River. In addition, as a result of previous operations around this region, Russian soldiers were both cornered and lost important logistics points. Many of the bridges on this front were also destroyed by Ukrainian troops, and the passages used by Russian soldiers to flow military shipments became less and less. At the same time, these operations, which have shifted to the southern front, may shift to the Crimea at any moment. In fact, according to the latest news, it was reported that reconnaissance was carried out with RQ-4B Global Hawk strategic unmanned aerial vehicles in the east of Crimea. After the discoveries, it is estimated that first of all Zaporizhia and then the Kherson region can be targeted. Moreover, it was stated that these unmanned aerial vehicles will advance to the Crimea, and are already operating in the east of it. According to experts, Russian electronic warfare systems may interfere with these aircraft. Ukrainian army, which has become stronger with NATO resources, can take action for large-scale attacks on the southern and southeastern fronts at any time. In recent days, especially on these fronts, mutual attacks have increased. As a result of the advance of Ukraine in the Kherson region, Russia had ordered its army to withdraw. Thereupon, mysterious attacks on Crimean lands and damage to Russian military points were increased. This caused the Russian army to have to advance to this region again due to anxiety. Although mutual attacks have increased again in this region on the border of Crimea, Russia is starting to lose losses in the region again. This is because it targets infrastructures. These attacks damage infrastructures and cannot achieve a military success. On the contrary, it only wastes its military resources. As it is known, the armed forces of Ukraine started simultaneous operations on the fronts. When the operations inflicted heavy losses on the Russian army, mutual attacks began to increase both on land and in the air. But many of Russia's attacks are wasted due to lack of accuracy and strategic mistakes. Ukrainian army prevents most of these attacks thanks to the defense systems from the countries and the skills of the soldiers. This situation causes Russia, which is already dealing with serious military problems, to inflict more casualties. Increase in operations that continue without slowing down has increased the tension on the Russian side. In fact, as we mentioned in the previous videos, this tension is reflected in the commanders on the Russian side. In recent days, many important names have been dismissed and notable names have been appointed instead. This shows that Moscow is now trying its last chances. According to estimates, Russia will increase its measures as it will have difficulty in responding to operations on the southern and southeastern fronts. Moreover, these regions will be of greater importance in the event that Russia's land connection is broken, as they are bordered by the sea. But if it can't make a flow of military shipments by land, it will be much more difficult to do it by sea. Russian soldiers, who cannot reach the required amount of military equipment at the time of need, will have more and more difficulties and they will decrease in their operational strength. This may cause them to not even be able to protect themselves, rather than their territory. While Russia is dealing with such big problems, Ukraine is getting stronger thanks to the support from NATO countries and many countries. This time, the news of support came from England again. According to the latest news, the UK will provide 14 Challenger 2 tanks for Ukraine, as well as approximately 30 155mm as 90 self-propelled artillery systems. Gradual increase in these aids shows that the UK will increase its support for Ukraine. These aids include equipment, training and other types of support for the Ukrainian army. With these supports to Ukraine, it is aimed that the country will defend itself against Russia and contribute to the further development of its military capabilities. Britain has been providing a sizable support to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, including a large amount of anti-tank weapons. At the same time, the British Prime Minister calls on the Allies to implement the planned support for 2023 as soon as possible to achieve maximum effect in the war. It is known that these supports determine the fate of the war and have a critical role on behalf of the countries. Britain, which has become one of the biggest supporters, proves that it is on the side of Ukraine with the military equipment support it has increased for a long time. In the long run, all support from countries will be of more critical importance. For this, the support must be constantly increased. United Kingdom recently reported that thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have been trained on British soil in the last 6 months, and training will begin on the use of tanks and weapons. As part of this effort, it was announced that the UK Defence Minister will visit Germany and Estonia to work with NATO allies and other countries to accelerate military support for Ukraine. In addition, the Secretary of State announced that he will visit the United States to discuss how the United States and the United Kingdom, as the most supportive countries, can encourage more support to be provided. It was also stated that a visit will be made to Canada, which is a supporter of Ukraine, to discuss the close coordination of international sanctions and efforts to increase support for Ukraine. Moreover, according to the statements, for the first time a Western country will agree to send its heavy armored vehicles to Ukraine. Now all such help is much more important. Moreover, while the support provided to Ukraine is increasing, the imposition of sanctions against Russia completely advances the course of the war in favor of Ukraine. If this situation continues in this way, both the strength and morale of the Russian soldiers will weaken. Russian army, which has gradually lost its motivation for the war, will have to face great defeats due to the losses it has suffered day by day. This will have a great influence on the fate of the war. Moves of the Ukrainian army on the fronts and the support provided by the countries are now of much greater importance. If the operations of the Ukrainian armed forces are continued and increased, greater success will be achieved in the regions and the lost regions will be taken back. This will ensure the removal of Russian soldiers from the fronts. On the other hand, if Russia continues its attacks on infrastructures that it has not achieved success, it will start to lose more military resources rather than gain. All kinds of moves now have to be carried out in a much more strategic direction. Otherwise, it will be more difficult to compensate for the losses caused by mistakes. Especially for Russia, there is no longer any room for error. We'll see what happens in the next few days. We have reached the end of another video. You can support us by liking the video. You can easily follow new videos by subscribing. I wish you all a war-free day. See you.